families depends on our worldview. Now, VCY America presents Worldview Radio with Brandon House.
And welcome, March 26, 2025. Let's continue part two from what we were talking about yesterday, and then we'll go back to some guests tomorrow. And I want to open the phone lines up today also to get your thoughts on yesterday and today. Remember, we're talking about how it's so imperative for the Marxists to infiltrate the institution of the family in order to infiltrate the institution of government and church. We talked about three institutions created by God: family government, civil government, church government. And I want to talk today particularly about the influence of fathers, the importance of fathers. Even psychologists, psychiatrists, who maybe are not even looking at this through the lens of a Christian worldview or the Bible, know the importance of fathers. I want to share with you some of what they're saying, right? I think you'll find it quite fascinating. Remember yesterday we talked about a few points. I wanted to point out yesterday in way of review that evolution includes the lie that God did not create, and that's divinely create, the institution of the family. God did not divinely ordain the institution of the family. How could he? Because it's all a mistake, random chance, billions and billions of, things had to happen. Mutations, billions of them, to create what we have today. And random selection. We're all here without any ordained purpose. It's just random chance. So how could the family be an ordained institution created by God? That's what evolution says. And by going after the family, by promoting evolution, they're really going after the institution of the family. We talked about how in the Garden of Eden, right there in Genesis 3, right away, we see an attack on the family to break up the institution of family as ordained by God in the garden, and the deception of Eve and then Adam, and then the spiritual battle talked about in Genesis chapter 3, verse 16, where the woman will desire to rule over the man. We looked up that word rule in the original, and it had to do with really a dominion, a legal authority, a governmental type authority over the husband. And of course, this is part of the fall, right? And then we learned in our program the other day, last week, about many of the feminists that they were also open Marxist, or at least they were as open as they could be about it at the time, but they were Marxists, like Betty Friedan, who basically wrote the Manifesto for Feminism. So yesterday we looked at that point. Evolution includes the lie that God did not divinely create or ordain the institution of the family. We also looked at the fact that civil authority was vested in man, the family of Noah, the 8 that got off the ark. That civil authority was vested in the family. There's no government when Noah and his family got off the ark. The right to take a life for innocent bloodshed was given to a family. Civil authority was given to a family, the fathers particularly. And then what is government? Government is simply individual families coming together collectively to defend individual rights. Then we looked at the fact that the church, as ordained by God, of which we know that his son, Jesus Christ, is the chief cornerstone. What is it composed of? It's composed of families that collectively come together for what purpose? Well, exercising their spiritual gifts for the purpose of education, edification, and the equipping of the saints. So notice again, it takes the family, the institution of the family, to bring us a New Testament church where families come together collectively to exercise their spiritual gifts. The infiltration of the institution of the family with ideas and philosophies that are contrary to God's word, well, what does it do? It undermines the institutions of government and church. When the family is infiltrated with ideas and philosophies that are contrary to God's word, then those family members take those ideas with them into the institutions of government and the church. And so by infiltrating the family, the cultural Marxist can thus infiltrate the institutions of church and government. We also learn that the ideas and philosophies that damage and undermine and destroy the institution of the family leads to a depletion of the necessary and biblical leadership that is required for a godly New Testament church and good government. So where do your folks come from that are involved in government? Well, they come from a family, right? Somebody had to give birth to them. Where do the people come from that are supposed to be leading our New Testament churches? Well, they come from a family. And notice what has or has not been taught in the family, or what the family has given responsibility over to, who they've given it over to, education, media. Notice how that then depletes the necessary godly leadership for church and leadership for good government. So again, if you break down the family, the role, the responsibility of the family, then you can start to really impact the other two institutions created by God. And then we learn that cultural Marxism disguises their ideology, their agenda, their worldview with deceptive masking terms that, well, proclaim lies about God, the Bible, the biblical roles of men and women, economics, private property, and they use masking terms. And sadly, this has now been embraced by not just local governments who teach, many local governments have bought into the cultural Marxism, but many so-called churches today, New Testament churches today, so-called, have bought into these Marxist ideologies. Like, well, that there is no God-ordained role distinction between men and women. How many churches today teach the biblical roles of men and women, God-ordained biblical roles of men and women? Complementarianism, right? Many of our churches today teach social justice. That's socialism. Many of them are opposed to, laws that maintain our border. Many so-called churches and Christian ministries, and we've documented many of them over the years, are all for open borders. So notice how these Marxist ideologies now creep into churches to destroy the purpose and function of the church, but to give validity, so-called, to the Marxist globalist ideology. So the cultural Marxists have disguised their ideology through deceptive masking terms by which to get more followers to their worldview. But if you can infiltrate the family, if you can destroy the family, if you can get the family to give up their rightful God-ordained responsibilities and turn them over to the government schools, then you can basically take over the other two institutions. Now, fathers, I wanted to go, we know that the Marxists, they really don't like the fathers, the cultural Marxists, when they came to America in 1933, the Frankfurt School. They said we're going to go after education and media to particularly do away with that patriarchal society and replace it with a matriarchal society. And we're going to label men. Remember Theodore Adorno? He wrote a book in 1950 called The Authoritarian Personality, 1950. The Authoritarian Personality. And in that book, and I deal with it in my documentary Brainwashed America, Part 1 or 2. In that book, he proclaimed that men that found certain things non-negotiable, not open to being talked about, that was a sign that they were an authoritarian personality. As I said the other day, there are certain things you're like, well, I'm not discussing. That's not open for discussion. This is a black and white matter. This is where I stand on this issue of what is right, and I'm not going to dialogue with you or compromise on this, so there's no conversation to be had. This is my position. This is where I stand. Now, if you're like that, one of the guys at the Frankfurt School, Theodore Adorno, in 1950, the authoritarian personality, said, you're a bad person. Patriotism, the believing in absolute truth. I mean, he gave a long list, and he actually put together a test. It was known as the F-scale test. And by F, he meant fascist. So there was a test of questions to evaluate whether a man was a fascist or authoritarian personality. When you look at the way we have seen people like John Wayne, staunch anti-communist, Ronald Reagan, Donald Trump, many others, the average patriotic American male described as having toxic masculinity, white privilege. All of this is in the same bucket. It's the same idea. And now, as we said yesterday, the American Psychological Association has a whole paper they put out on how men that are involved in toxic masculinity actually have a psychological problem. You got a mental illness. This is not new. Many people, I'm sure, think this is all new, but there's that book, 1950, The Authoritarian Personality by Theodore Adorno, and the F-scale test. You're a fascist. That's the Frankfurt School. These guys, again, 1933, come to America, get dropped down here at Brandeis, Berkeley, Princeton at the invitation of John Dewey, the father of progressive education in America. And they particularly said, we're going after the American male. We're going to label them as narrow-minded, intolerant, authoritarian, harsh, rigid, because we're going after the father. Because once you move those patriotic, conservative, convicted men out of the way, who's going to protect the family? Who then is also going to fill the leadership roles in government and church? Do we have a deficit today when it comes to male leadership? Strong, moral, godly, patriotic leadership? There's a huge deficit. Why? Because the incubator, the family, has largely been compromised. The other thing is we have intimidated men to the point where many, many men have convictions. They either don't have the courage of their convictions. They have convictions, but they don't have the courage of their convictions to carry them out. Just vocalize them. Or they've seen where the cultural stream is going, and it is a swim upstream, and they're just like, it's not worth it. And so they remain silent. The silent majority, right? So there are men who believe in certain patriotic ideas and principles. They just realize they're swimming up a stream that is, the current's too strong. We're not changing courses. Now, we are who we are. We're committed to the truth that we are committed to. Worldview Tube is a broadcast network that I started in 2006, but it's based on my 35 years as an author and speaker and commentator. Worldview Tube is here to defend the truth of a Christian worldview. And we believe we can apply it to all areas of life, like law, science, economics, history, family, social issues, education, religion, major issues.
At worldviewtube.com, we provide news from around the globe that isn't typically covered by mainstream media. Visit worldviewtube.com to watch our experts and analysts discuss all your favorite topics on our 24/7 live stream. Explore our extensive collection of unfiltered and uncensored content from 35 years of production. Go to worldviewtube.com today. Also find us on all of these major platforms and download our Worldview Tube mobile app.
Glad you're with us. I just got a text from one of our longtime supporters. I just noticed this weekend that your app for Worldview Tube has been updated and works. I've been missing a lot of shows because I haven't been able to get them through the app. You may want to let other people know that the app is now upgraded and now available. All right. Well, that's a great idea. Worldviewtube.com/apps. Worldviewtube.com/apps. Get you all of our apps for iPhone, Android, Roku, all of them. Worldviewtube.com/apps. All right, we're day 2. We're going to open the phone lines today. Day 2 on how the cultural Marxists have infiltrated the family, the institution of the family, so that they can infiltrate and take down the godly and constitutional purpose of civil government, and then the godly purpose and description for a New Testament church. So if you take on the family, which is the incubator for passing on a Christian worldview and biblical values, then you obviously can weaken or take down the effectiveness of your government, our governments, plural, local, state, and federal, and obviously then compromise churches, compromise local New Testament churches, and get them off their mission. No longer then about thus saith the Lord, no longer about training up people in the way of the Lord, helping them to become evangelists, discipleship, the Great Commission. Now it's about not things that are spiritual, but really focused on things that are material, building the kingdom of God here and now, being more concerned about material needs than the spiritual needs. You can clothe people, you can feed people, but if they die and go into a Christless eternity, what good was all that, right? So you cannot replace the biblical gospel with a social gospel, which is what the Marxists have done. That's why I wrote the book Marxianity. But we have a deficit, as I was saying before the break, of leadership in America. And one reason is because we're not using the family as that incubator to build the kind of men we need to be the leaders in government and in the New Testament churches. And in fact, much of what happens in our government schools, government policies, and in churches actually discourages manliness, masculinity, moral leadership. Much of our government policies have waged a war on men. No-fault divorce, divorce courts. And much of our culture today, as we said, the TV shows have changed from Ozzie and Harriet days, black and white, Ozzie and Harriet, to Leave It to Beaver. These kind of shows, the Waltons, Little House on the Prairie, to the shows of the early 90s that really kicked off in earnest. Shows that berate men. The father, he's the idiot of the broadcast. He's useless. He's not needed. He's irrelevant, incompetent, a buffoon. And this attack on the American male has led some to believe they don't need or want a man in their life. Now, this is an older survey, but this comes from Baby Talk magazine back in 2009. I'd like to see if I could find an updated one, but this was from my book, Grave Influence, back in 2009. A survey on Baby Talk magazine found that many married ladies feel it might sometimes be easier to go the mommy route alone. Of these women, 76% likened the idea of not fighting, liked the idea, I should say. 76% liked the idea of not fighting with a partner over the best way to raise a child. Other pros to being single were not having the chore of keeping up a healthy marriage, 69%. Not dealing with in-laws, 30%. And single moms agree. almost 2/3 of the unmarried moms felt that it would be harder to be a parent if there was a man in the house. Of the single ladies, 55% said they feel relieved to not have to worry about working on a marriage too. And 38% said they feel freer to follow their own dreams. Now, whether this is propaganda or reality, I would have to see, the polling. Maybe I can get my buddy Mark Mitchell, the lead pollster at Rasmussen, to do a poll for us. But I wouldn't be shocked by these numbers if they were true. If they are true, I wouldn't be shocked. But what happens when a society loses strong fathers? Well, let me go to an article. And this is a psychology website. But even the psychologists know there's a problem when we have weak fathers. It's actually titled Weak Father Figure Psychology. Weak Father Figure Psychology, Impact on Child Development and Adult Relationships. Let me just read a couple paragraphs I found really interesting. Another characteristic is a lack of authority or leadership. A father who fails to set boundaries or provide guidance can leave children feeling insecure and directionless. This doesn't mean being an authoritarian, quite the opposite. It's about providing a stable, consistent presence that children can rely on and learn from. The inability to set boundaries is a significant issue. Boundaries help children feel safe and understand their place in the world. A father who can't or won't establish and enforce reasonable rules and limits leaves his children without this crucial framework for growth and development. Now, weak fathers. My wife is very perceptive. She's known in our private conversations to say, yeah, I can just tell you right now, her husband is a pansy. Her husband is a wimp. My wife has zero respect for weak men. She just this week was playing a video of a social influencer, as they call them. She likes to follow these social influencers that do a great job at home decor, decorating, cooking, different things. And one of these gals, she was playing a video of her about her family, what she was up to. And I said, well, tell me about her. And she told me who she was, how many kids she had, where she lived. And she said, but look at her husband. She pulled up a picture of the family. She said, this guy is a wimp. She walks all over him. My wife has zero respect, I'll say it again, for weak men. I don't ask her to think this way, to believe this way, to say these things. She routinely, in a conversation in any given week or month, points this out. Why is that? Because I think at the end of the day, women that have common sense and women that have been reared in a home with a good family, a good father, a good mother, a good marriage, they see the importance of male leadership. I've asked my wife, why did you marry me with my strong type A personality over someone else? And the answer would be, because I knew you would work hard to provide. Now, wait a minute. Isn't that interesting? A lot of women, that's what they want. They want security. They have I think, a God-given inclination that it's important to marry someone that is going to provide and care for her. And I often said, now you knew I had a pretty strong personality before you married me. Why would you marry someone with such a strong personality versus some of these gals that you know that marry such weak men? And she said, because I would not have respect for someone like that. And I think a lot of women, whether they're allowed to verbalize it or not, feel respect, but a security from a man that has strong convictions and is, as we call them today, type A. That's the way they want to categorize, I think, just guys that, well, have a passion about something, have a passion about their family, have a passion about their Christian faith, have a passion about their job, their career. They're described that way. And I think there are a lot of women that appreciate those kind of individuals. Clearly, we see people like Donald Trump having done quite well with women, despite what the liberal media will tell you. And so I think women, many of them, that have their head screwed on right, have their values set correct, appreciate a strong leader. Now, there are other women that don't. They really want someone that apparently they can walk right over top of. But children need that strong figure in their life to set boundaries. And even magazines and articles and websites that are psychology based, they're not even coming at it from a Christian worldview perspective, will say, look, we know that children do better when there is a father who sets and reinforces boundaries, values, expectations. The article goes on to say, children who can't rely on their fathers for consistent support and affection may struggle to form secure attachments later in life, affecting their ability to build and maintain healthy relationships. It even goes on to say, gender identity confusion can also arise, particularly for boys who lack a strong male role model. Let me go to another one. Now, this one is a website called Family, then I'm going to go to the Bible. This is a website called Family Matters. Strong fathers, strong communities. I like that title. A professor of sociology at Rutgers University said the percentage of American children living apart from their biological fathers will reach 50% by the next century. We're probably close to that already, are we not? Children have a risk factor of 2 to 3 times that of fathered children for a wide range of negative outcomes, including dropping out of high school, giving birth as a teenager, and becoming a juvenile delinquent. We come back, the role of fathers and why the Marxists knows they have to destroy the institution of fatherhood for their revolution. Hello, I'm Brandon House. I want to thank you for all your support at wvwfoundation.com that helps make possible pushing out 24/7 content for free. Without your support, we'd have to put it all behind a paywall. But thanks to you and your support through our foundation, we're able to push it out for free as a broadcast service and broadcast ministry of WVW Foundation. Please consider going there and setting up an automatic monthly contribution, or go there and make an occasional contribution. If you prefer to support us through the mail, you'll find our mailing address there at wvwfoundation.com. You can also call and make your contribution over the phone by calling 901-825-0652. That's 901-825-0652. Again, all these details are available at wvwfoundation.com. Thank you for your support as we try to help people around the world understand the times through the lens of a Christian worldview. everybody. Welcome back. Glad you're with us. Worldview Radio, our website, worldviewradio.com. Hey, don't forget, we're coming to Milwaukee April 15th for the Worldview Radio Understanding the Times rally. Between phone and online, we're already at 1,000 people registered. So keep registering. We talked to them today about seats and the balcony and what we need to do to make sure that everybody has a seat. But we need you to register so we can prepare for your arrival. The tickets are free, but again, you must register so we can prepare for you. Worldviewtube.com/events, worldviewtube.com/events. It starts at 6:30, goes to 9:30 at the Waukesha Expo Center. I'll be there as a speaker along with Dr. Andy Woods and Aaron Lavarco, our reporter from Israel, who is on the ground now and will be on my show, Brandon House Live, tonight. So we're looking at how the institution of the father must be destroyed by the Marxists so they can undermine the institution of the family and then the God-ordained institution of civil government and the God-ordained institution of the New Testament church. The importance of strong fathers. We saw that many kids suffer from the lack of a strong father that upholds boundaries and expectations. We also see that many of them do very poorly when it comes to life, such as dropping out of high school, giving birth as a teenager, and becoming a juvenile delinquent. Now, let me just stop right there for a minute because the Marxists benefit from that. When you have kids that drop out of high school, guess what you likely end up with? Not all cases, but you probably end up with more people in the welfare rolls. Bingo, that's the cultural Marxist idea. Collapse the economy by swelling the welfare rolls. You can collapse the economy and nationalize stuff. How about giving birth as a teenager? Well, that's good for the Planned Parenthood bottom line, is it not? Which, by the way, on my Worldview report tonight, I'm going to share with you the massive salaries that the executives of Planned Parenthood bring in every year. Are you ready to hear that tonight on the Worldview report? Well, if you have a lot of teenagers getting pregnant and then you encourage them to have abortions, more money for Planned Parenthood. And if they don't have an abortion, well, we're thankful for that, but now you can add to the welfare rolls. So the Marxists and their cultural Marxism, their socialism, actually benefit from the breakdown of family, as I've just explained. Another one is they become juvenile delinquents. Again, let's not forget about the prison industrial complex. Not only do the Marxists benefit, but the communitarian benefits. Communitarianism, big government, big business merging together. Many people today say, well, I'm a businessman. I'm an entrepreneur. No, you're not. Describe to me what you do. Oh, you're not. I'm sorry, you're not operating the free market. You're a communitarian. You're running a business that is funded by the government. If the tax-paying dollars were taken from your company, it would collapse. You're not a real bright guy because you can run a business that's funded by the federal government, okay? Morons at PBS do that. Simpletons, debased, dark-hearted fools at PBS can run a company. Well, of course they can. They get $500 million a year from the taxpayer. That doesn't make you a smart businessman. That doesn't make you an entrepreneur, okay? That makes you a communitarian. Big government, big business merging together. And that's what you have with our prison industrial complex. You have a lot of people making money, taxpayer money, by locking people up, many of them who have never committed a violent crime, and therefore they should not be locked up. There may indeed need to be punishment, but they don't need to be warehoused. But when you break down the family and you end up with juvenile delinquents who go on to become adults and end up in the prison system, you have a lot of people in that communitarian, fascist, big government, big business system that make a lot of money. They need more clients. Well, how do we get more people to become juvenile delinquents and thus become criminals as an adult? Because we're profiting from this, says those involved. Approximately 30% of all American children are born into a single-parent homes. And for the Black community, that figure is 68%. Over half of all children living with a single mother are living in poverty. Well, wait a minute. Over half of all children living with a single mother are living in poverty. But I thought we didn't need men. That's a lie. That's a rate, by the way, that's 5 to 6 times that of kids living with both parents. What else does this report tell us? 71% of all high school dropouts come from fatherless homes. 71%. That's according to the National Principals Association report on the state of high schools. 90% of homeless and runaway children are from fatherless homes. 90%. Children from low-income, two-parent families outperform students from high-income, single-parent homes. I need to read that again. Children from low-income, two-parent families outperform students from high-income, single-parent homes. Almost twice as many high achievers come from two-parent homes as one-parent homes, according to a study by the Charles F. Kettering Foundation. If you don't want capitalists, destroy the father and the family. And you won't likely get many capitalists. Oh, you'll get some that overcome the odds. But the odds are in the favor of the Marxist, the socialist, that if you destroy the father, the institution of family, and you don't have fathers in the home, you're likely to end up with people that do not succeed in life and therefore will not become a dreaded capitalist. Because almost twice as many high achievers come from two-parent homes as one-parent homes. A committee assembled by the Board of Children and Families of the National Research Council concluded children learn critical lessons about how to recognize and deal with highly charged emotions in the content of play with their fathers. Fathers, in effect, give children practice in regulating their own emotions and recognizing others' emotional clues. Now, every father that has played baseball in the backyard or football or horseshoes or cornhole or whatever game you're playing, Uno, knows that when you beat that kid at a sport, particularly if it's a boy, if they're competitive, they can get upset. But it's good to let them get beat, to learn how to regulate their emotions. And of course, sometimes dads let the child win to experience the thrill of winning. But sometimes a dad says, you know what, they need to lose and learn how to handle it. And pretty much every father knows what I'm talking about. They've experienced that. At play and in other realms, fathers tend to stress competition. Yeah, if you learn how to be involved in competition, you're going to be a good businessman. You want to promote socialism? Don't have competition. Everybody gets a participation award. At play and in other realms, fathers tend to stress competition, challenge, initiative, risk-taking, and independence. Fathers' involvement seems to be linked to improved quantitative and verbal skills and improved problem-solving ability and higher academics. You want socialism to succeed? Make sure there are not a lot of men around in the family. Make sure the dad is absent. Set up an environment where dad is supposedly not needed. He can be replaced. Make for easy divorce. Make sure the dad doesn't get a lot of influence and time with the kids if there is a divorce. Family life, marriage, and child rearing is a civilizing force for men. Isn't that interesting? How many people do you know that are not married, and that isn't a blanket statement, I want to be careful with that, but are not married, and you say to yourself, yeah, at 50, 60 years old, you can see the impact in a negative way because they have never been married and they've never had children. Anyone that is married and has children knows how that has smoothed off the rough edges in your personality, in your life, how you've become more patient, long-suffering, compassionate, understanding, forgiving. I've noticed a trend with people that have never had their own children, but finally will marry somebody that has, and those kids who they really didn't raise because they have a father who was raising them and their mother, but they married a lady that had children, and particularly sometimes those kids were already teenagers at the time, and those kids go on to have children. I love how some of them always want to tell me about, well, I'm going to go be with my grandchild. And I don't have the stomach to say to them, I'm like, you can call them what you want, but let me tell you something. In my opinion, and you can disagree with me, grandfather, that's a title for those that have endured raising children. Grandchildren, in my mind, is the reward that comes from raising children. And I love how some of these guys tell me, oh, I got to go be with my grandkids. And I'm thinking, yeah, you didn't walk the floor one night with a colicky child. Not to mention multiple nights in a row for weeks on end. And all the other challenges that go with raising children. But there is something about raising a child, raising children, that really makes you value the grandchildren. It also has a way of civilizing you, making you a far better person. In fact, the study showed that family life and marriage encourages men to develop prudence, cooperativeness, honesty, trust, self-sacrifice, and other habits that can lead to success and as an economic provider. Wow. Again, you want a good entrepreneur? Get him married and let him have children, and he'll learn quality traits that make him a great entrepreneur and business owner. Let me go to the Bible real quick. Exodus 20, verse 12. Honor your father and mother, that your days may be long in the land that the Lord your God is giving you. Now, this is a principle that is good for us, but it obviously in Exodus, we're talking to the Israelites, but it's one for us as well. We can find it repeated in the New Testament. How are mothers and fathers honored today? A lot of times they're not, aren't they? Many people today they don't have the financial wherewithal maybe to care for their aging parents, but it is heartbreaking the number of aged parents find themselves alone in nursing homes, alone and forgotten. Where's the honor? It was very common in our culture for multiple generations to live under one roof. That's very common, by the way, in some of the folks that have come here from other countries where that respect for elders has been maintained. Proverbs 22:6, train up a child in the way he should go. Even when he is old, he will not depart from it. How's that going with our government schools? Children, obey your parents in everything, for this pleases the Lord. Have you ever heard of the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child? Does it say obey the parents? No. The UN Convention on the Rights of the Child says what? You're equal to your parents. Your parents don't have the right to tell you what you can wear, what you can believe. They don't have the right to take you to church. And if they do, you can sue them. Yeah, so much for train, right? 1-800-347-9829. Hello, I'm Brandon House. Melissa and I have been taking Bella Grace, this powerful elixir, since last fall, 2023. The results have been amazing. My hands would crack and bleed, deep cuts and cracks every winter for years. No matter what we did, we couldn't get them to stop cracking and bleeding. This year, I took Bella Grace, no cracking, no bleeding. My acid reflux, gone. Haven't had to take a Pepsid. My hair growth, the last 2 times I had my hair cut, the lady had to use thinning shears on my hair. That's amazing. We've also received incredible feedback from you, our listening audience, and the impact it's had for you. This is loaded with astaxanthin. That's a powerful antioxidant. Collagen, but top grade collagen. Studies show 95% of it is being absorbed in the body because of the way they develop it. Then we have something called cat's claw. That's an anti-inflammatory from a vine in Peru. It's the bark, and it's an anti-inflammatory. There are about 80 clinical trials on Bella Grace. Please get a subscription now and save. Melissa House, BG. Church-PT2.com. All right, 1-800-347-9829. Your thoughts, your comments, your questions. 1-800-347-9829. Let me give you another one. Therefore, a man shall leave his father and his mother and hold fast to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. You know what? I see a problem today? Men that don't want to grow up. Men that don't want to grow up. They don't want to leave and replace the mother with what is now their primary, their wife. They're still busy being mama's little boy. Now, to some extent, we are, those of us that have parents that are still alive, always your parents' little boy or little girl, right? But there's a place in which the primary person in your life becomes your wife. You're still not, you're not catering to the demands of your mother. And any good mother knows this and makes space for that daughter-in-law. Psalm 127 says that children are to be like arrows in the hand of a warrior. Yet today we're told that children can be what? An inconvenience. And then of course you have nations like China that tried their one-child policy. Of course, that's communist red China. A fool, Proverbs 15 says, rejects his father's discipline. We need fathers. The Bible mentions fathers over and over again. Fathers and discipline, driving out the foolishness of a son. Proverbs 13:1, a wise son accepts his father's discipline. The Bible, again, is replete with the role of the father and its vital role. And even psychologists who aren't coming from a Christian worldview perspective know this. But if the Marxists can infiltrate the family, take down the father, they can then make sure they don't have the moral, biblical, patriotic, convictional leadership necessary for good government or a powerful New Testament church. And so now we know why there's been a war on the father and on the family. 1-800-347-9829. Lily in Arizona, line 1. Lily, thank you for calling in today, Lily.
Thank you, Brandon. Appreciate you lining up all of this, especially from government down to family, or should I say from family to government. I just wanted to say one thing, a couple of things that are really important. In Acts, as Moses was finishing up and knowing his time was short, he said something to the effect, to be sure and follow God's word. But it only took a generation until everything fell apart. And he knew it, and he said it. I think it's at the end of Deuteronomy. And I can testify that it's been a generation that I have witnessed, as I've witnessed it fall apart because of that main reason, the breakup of the family, the demasculation of men, and the feminist movement. I saw it all. I was part of it, and I repented 40-something years ago. And the thing is that we were old school. My husband and I, 45 years married before the Lord took him home, and we raised 5 children, and we were entrepreneurs. We had our own construction business, and all of my children now have their own businesses, and by the grace of God, they're all following him.
Wow.
And it amazes me that in my work in, say, like a gospel rescue mission or working with women in transition, how few women have basic skills of homemaking, much less even, want to. It's a sad thing because I was privileged to stay home until I ended up working actually in radio like you. But the thing is that women have lost so much by not recognizing the beauty in how God established things. And I believe that women can only function in their spiritual gifts when they are under authority. If it's a husband or if they're widowed or single, that they are under the authority of a pastor. And there's just too many free agents out there, and it's a sad commentary to see the lack of manhood among young men and the lack of femininity among women.
Wow.
And truly, if that is, the whole Marxist agenda, they've succeeded well because it only took a generation.
One generation. Wow. So well said, Lily. I'm so glad you called in today. Lily from Arizona.
Thank you.
We must have a big audience. I think we do. We have a big station in Arizona with VCY because our next caller is also from Arizona. Line 2, Peter. Thanks for calling in today, Peter.
Hey, Brandon, it's an honor to speak with you, sir. I appreciate everything you've taught me over the past few years.
Well, thank you.
So real quick here, I'll try not to stumble on my words. My father was a Ukrainian immigrant, came to the U.S. in 1949. He never saw his parents again after the age of 13 because of the war. He had 4 children. I was one of them, obviously. I grew up. I didn't want any kids, but God had different plans. He ended up giving me 3 kids. And I realized that as I was raising them, that God gives you children to teach you just how selfish you really are.
That's so true.
And to weed that out of you. And so one of the things my first son said when he was 4 years old, I put him to bed one night, I tickled him, I gave him a glass of water, I prayed with him, I goosed him. I'm trying to leave the room for the last time, and I hear, "Daddy?" I turn around, I go, "Yes, son." My son goes, "What if God accidentally made me smarter than him?" And so I kind of knew I was on the right track at that point.
Wow. Thank you for that, Peter. Let's run real quick. Chris, line 3. Chris, thank you for calling in.
Hey, Brandon. Thanks for taking my call. Great show. I'll try to go really quickly here. Brandon, when I was in school, I was in special ed. I had ADD, and I never had a high skill set, and my social skills have never been the best. But, an observation that I've made over the years as a Christian since I got saved is that it seems like Christian women only want to marry guys who have those things, college degrees, high skill set, and entrepreneurial, and I can understand that. But I've always felt like guys like me that are a little slower, women don't like us as much, and maybe that's just the wrong observation, but that's how I've always felt, and I find that kind of hurtful, but I don't know, maybe I'm wrong about that. That's
well, let me just answer real quick before I run out of time. I think one reason is our culture has so much valued college education. But we're seeing that trend now destroyed as so many young people have college degrees, massive debt, and cannot even make a living. So I think more and more women are starting to realize this. I pray that's the case for you, Chris, as well as everybody else. Take care.
This has been...
and that's our broadcast on those stations. We're back with WROS out of Jacksonville, Florida, and Worldview Tube. Let me give you another verse or two here. I have a couple more I want to give you related to fathers. Proverbs 23:13. Do not hold back discipline from the child. Although you strike him with the rod, he will not die. Of course, what of the secular humanist, the humanist, so many of the psychologists, not all of them, but many of them, corporal punishment. It's so wrong. Now, I think corporal punishment should be something that's handed out very much with discretion. I think there are people that go to that way too fast, and most of it I know it's been done out of anger for a lot of people. I think that the rod is one of those things, or spanking, corporal punishment, is something that should be done very sparingly so it doesn't lose its full effect. But now we've had corporal punishment removed from our schools, and now who runs the schools? The kids run the schools because they have no fear of authority. And how well does that prepare them for life? Romans 13 says, fear the government. Do what is right and you'll have no fear. But if you don't, you should be very afraid, because the government has the power to use the sword to kill you. Capital punishment. Why is it that so few young people today have respect for legitimate God-ordained authority when they get out in the world? or even when they're out as high school students on the street. They don't have any fear for their teachers, their school administrator, their principal. Why would they have any fear for any other authority? And of course, look at how ineffective many of our schools are because there is no orderliness. You really can't teach. So many teachers I've talked to talk about this fact, that there's an inability to even have a structured classroom for which to teach. It's because we've had the psychologists tell us how corporal punishment is wrong. And it can be wrong if it's done for the wrong reasons, the wrong attitude, the wrong temperament. But the Bible says they're not going to die. They're not going to die from corporal punishment. And it'll teach a child to be disciplined. Proverbs 29, the rod and reproof give wisdom, but a child who gets his way brings shame to his mother. And I could go on and on with scripture related to the father and to the home and this God-ordained institution that feeds the other two. We'll put this up online, worldviewtube.com, worldviewtube.com later today, and at worldviewradio.com as a MP3 for you to share. Very soon, folks, and I know I've been talking about it, but very soon we are going to have the ability for you to search 35 years of my Worldview Tube vault. My radio shows, my TV shows, my books, my documentaries, all my interviews. We have been working for months at great expense with isolated and quarantined AI servers that will allow you to search so many topics and ask it questions. I'm really excited about it because I think there are a lot of young folks out there that want answers. They want answers from the Bible. They want answers from history. They want worldview training. And I'm really excited about that. In fact, I was talking to someone today who's in the military, about ready to retire. And they were saying, you know how rare your vault is, that you have 35 years of all of that stuff in a vault? I said, do you know it's 60,000 MP3s? 30,000 MP4s. MP4s are videos. 60,000 audios, 30,000 videos. 30,000. This individual said, I know, I've been hearing you talk about it. And in my line of work in the military, I thought that is so cool that he has 35 years of that. And it made me realize in my job, we have 20 years of videos where we were out in the field and overseas filming and documenting military history. And I said, hey, why don't we do what Brandon's done and let's create ourselves a vault? And he said, we've now taken 20 years of videos and we're putting them all up online for the public to access. I said, wait a minute. You're telling me my little Christian radio show is now influencing a segment of the U.S. military to create its own vault of videos that have been sitting on a shelf? And he said, yep. I said, that's pretty cool. Thanks for sharing that. But we're very close to unveiling this artificial intelligence. It's going to be amazing. I cannot wait to be able to research all the amazing people I've interviewed and gain from their wisdom with just the click of a button or two. It's going to be amazing to bring back all of that great research by Phil Haney, Dr. John Whitcomb, Jimmy DeYoung, and others. It's coming soon, folks. Take care.
You're watching Worldview 2, built on the 35 years of Worldview books, documentaries, research, high-profile interviews, and the radio and television broadcasts of Brannon House.
Colonel Rob Maness has a lifelong record of providing dedicated service to this nation. Having worked his way up from the enlisted ranks to full colonel, He served our country for more than 32 years. He has served as a bomber squadron commander, bomb disposal technician, Joint Chiefs of Staff Operations Officer, assisted the National Security Team with the campaign plan for the global war on terrorism. He authored the first theater nuclear war plan and served as the Vice Commander of America's largest airborne intelligence wing. Colonel Rob Maness is a true American hero. This is Rob Maness Live.
Yeah, I just want to say it's so well earned after watching your performance. I'm so pleased to present this proclamation to you.
Shen Yun received proclamations from San Diego County Board of Supervisor Joel Anderson and Poway Council member Jenny Mayeda. The group performed in Escondido, California from March 13 to 19. The audience enjoyed the live orchestra and transformative backdrop.
Together, it was just a huge masterpiece and a feast for the eyes and the ears.
You have to see it in person. I can't give it justice in describing it, but if you saw it in person, you'd be amazed.
It was so flawless. It was almost as if the dancers were just gliding, almost floating.
It was very entertaining, and it added such a great dimension to the whole performance.
Since its inception in 2006, Shen Yun's mission is to revive genuine traditional culture. It takes viewers through ancient legends to modern-day stories of the current persecution happening in China.
It was a story of good over evil. We saw what the communists did to China, and we also saw how people persevere and live past and improve their lives despite communism.
I missed out on a lot of this, the cultural heritage and experiencing, what my ancestors had, and so I'm really thankful that they preserved this for us and that I'm able to kind of catch up now.
The New York-based dance company portrays China's 5,000 years of culture, which was known as divinely inspired.
It was wonderful. It was a true display of grace and talent, and it was divine. I'm going to bring my whole entire family next time.
Dancing like I've never seen before. So it was quite amazing and uplifting, and I don't know how anybody could spend this time here and not feel super excited to tell their friends about it.
NTD News, Escondido, California.
Chinese communists are threatening that American dance company. Welcome to Whistleblower Wednesday. The Rob Maness Show's live on Worldview Tube, our X-Spaces simulcast, Rumble, YouTube, Truth Social Plus, Amazon Fire, and now Apple TV and Roku. Well, Shen Yun is a classical Chinese dance troupe based in upstate New York, as you just heard, and they're dedicated to showcasing traditional Chinese culture. And it's facing bomb threats and violent emails on a daily basis, often linked to the Chinese Communist Party. Well, and Shen Yun's also, it was created to revive China's traditions and to showcase the beauty of China and that 5,000 plus years of history and tradition and culture before the devastation of communism. And now even reports indicate that the CCP is influencing groups like the mainstream media and American regulatory agencies and international ones, too, to push its agenda. That strategy that could be used against any institution in the future. Don't we have enough problems with China in this country? You can see why Shen Yun is being targeted so aggressively in that opening video. The group receives very high praise for its accurate depiction of Chinese art and traditions before communism at every venue it performs at. And that's not just in America, it's around the world. And the CCP, well, they're going to do everything they can to prevent that. Jared Madsen's my guest today. Jared is a master of ceremonies for Shen Yun. He's the host of Learn Chinese Now. He's an audiobook narrator and holds a master's degree in Chinese medicine. Jared, welcome to the Rob Maness Show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, when I first saw this story, Jared, I had to get it on my Whistleblower Wednesday show because I don't think a lot of people realize what's happening here. When I say a lot of people, everyday Americans, people that may have even watched the show and attended the show around the globe. It kind of surprised me that I wasn't aware of it because I'm a CCP watcher pretty aggressively.
Well, I think that Shenyun is a litmus test. And what I mean by that is that where there's homegrown company, so where it's traditional Chinese culture, we started in 2006. Each performance, it goes through 5,000 years of traditional culture. One would think the Chinese government would love to have this. We're promoting Chinese culture and all the beauty and the divineness and the spirituality of 5,000 years of Chinese culture. But they have been against us since the very beginning.
So where did the idea come from? What was the genesis of putting this company together specifically to do that, to educate the world on 5,000 years of Chinese history?
Sure. So I'll go back. I won't go back 5,000 years. I'll go back about 30 years. So in 1992, the practice of Falun Gong was introduced in China. So it was you can think of it as a kind of like a Buddhist practice, but not a Buddhist religion, a meditative practice. That was introduced in 1992, but it has very ancient roots. It's a very Chinese practice. That grew from 92 to 1998, according to the Chinese government's statistics, 70 to 100 million people practicing in China alone. Now, in 1999, the leader of the Communist Party at the time, Jiang Zemin, due to simple factors, actually, like there being more people practicing Falun Gong than in the Chinese Communist Party itself, then launched this massive persecution campaign. Now I guess we have to go back even a little bit further. If you go back a few decades before that, we see after the communists took over in China, there was the Cultural Revolution, there was all types of movements. So it's almost like each leader, the most recent one from then would have been the Tiananmen Square Massacre in 1989. It's almost like each leader needs to find a group to persecute, and that gives them street cred in the communist world. And this was the group that Jiang Zemin started persecuting in 1999. The practice was outlawed, millions of people were rounded up. They were put into labor camps. They were tortured in prisons. There was forced organ harvesting, where perfectly healthy people would have their organs harvested and sold for profit. So that happened in 1999. That's when it started. I mean, the persecution goes on to this day. So then around 2004, I'd say 2005, some of the Falun Gong practitioners thought, let's make a show. I'm in Manhattan right now. I'm at Lincoln Center right now. We have our first Shenyun performance here in Manhattan tonight. And it started in New York. And people thought, you know what, let's just put on a show. At that point, it wasn't called Shenyun. It was just a show about traditional Chinese culture, and then one or two pieces about Falun Gong. In 2006, that developed into, let's do this for real. Let's create an actual performance company. So this is Falun Gong practitioners in the United States, some who had escaped persecution, some who, like me, I started practicing Falun Gong in China in the 90s when it was legal, when the Chinese government praised it for all the health benefits. Right? I remember seeing on the TV when I was there and reading the newspaper articles, all the praise and benefits about the healthcare costs saved and all of this. You have 100 million people sitting around meditating. That's a good thing. That's a positive thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So in 2006 is when the performance was established. I joined in 2007, and very soon, I would say by 2012, is when we really started selling out. And from that point on, most all of our shows will sell out. And the Chinese Communist Party didn't like that at all. Most of the show is traditional Chinese culture. Like I said, it goes through the different dynasties. We see different ethnic groups. There's generally around 18 to 20 pieces. One to two pieces are about Falun Gong itself, right? So we'll have one piece about the persecution of Falun Gong. So, a small percentage, less than 10% of the entire show talks about Falun Gong. 90+% is just traditional Chinese culture. But I think it's actually the traditional Chinese culture that is the greatest threat to communism. It's not so much Falun Gong, it's that traditional Chinese culture itself, with its belief in the divine for 5,000 years, this is an existential threat to the Chinese Communist Party. The Chinese Communist Party is officially atheist. You can believe in nothing beyond the Chinese Communist Party. We have to bow down and praise the Chinese Communist Party. And I see that as being the biggest threat that they see Shenyun as, a simple performing arts company in New York.
So belief in the divine, it boils down to that. I mean, there's a lot of history over 5,000 years. I was going to ask you, if there's anything specific. Let me just ask it. Beyond the belief in the divine, is there something specific about Chinese heritage, history, and traditional culture that the Communist Party can't handle? I mean, obviously they're atheists, right? But it's a powerful organization. Obviously, it's maintained power for many, many decades now through various means, including violence and everything. I guess it links in my mind to that Cultural Revolution period where they killed all those people, and then the Falun Gong seemed to have revived the traditional culture, and that's why they're coming after the Shenyun.
Yeah, well, I would say, to take a step back to the culture itself, I would say that faith itself can be very scary for any tyrannical government, right? Because you're believing in something that is outside of the government. At the same time, traditional Chinese culture embodies many of the same, we can call them universal principles, right? So no matter what country you're from, what ethnicity, what culture, man, woman, none of that matters. We all kind of have, across the world, we have a lot of these basic virtues in dignity, courage, compassion, love. Every culture has these. Communism does not. You know, so when people stand up and people are courageous and stand up in the face of oppression, that's something that as we have seen, this is not necessarily my opinion, we have seen that through decades of Chinese communist rule. Anytime a group stands up, they are immediately violently suppressed.
Yeah, that's a good point, which is one of the reasons why people are confused about what's going on with Russia these days, because God has come back into play in that country, and it's much more difficult to pin it down to a tyrannical type structure like you can the Communist Chinese Party. The CCP is still there, still strong from what we can tell here in America. So before we go to our first break, though, how did you said you were in China when you started practicing Falun Gong. I wanted to ask you, what is your connection to Chinese culture and history that led you to be where you're at so quickly after they were organized?
So to go back, my parents tell me that when I was a little kid, I grew up in Portland, Oregon. When I was young, I was born in Portland, Oregon, and there was a Chinese man who lived next door to us who practiced Tai Chi every morning. And apparently I would go out and I would watch him practice, and I was just fascinated by it. Because in my memory, I've always been incredibly fascinated with traditional Chinese culture, and I've always had the dream of not only learning and imbuing myself with traditional Chinese culture, but also giving that to the Western world, because I think there's many gems that traditional Chinese culture has. So in high school, I was lucky enough, it was the only high school in my state. I grew up in Iowa. It was the only high school there that had Chinese language. So I got to learn Chinese. I went with school year abroad to China when I was 17 years old. It was the first group of high schoolers that got to live in China. So I have been totally fascinated with Chinese culture my whole life.
Wow. Well, we got to take a break. When we come back, we've got some questions from our live audience. I knew they would have questions for you because this is a fascinating story, and it's very important to the folks in this audience who are paying very close attention to this adversary, the CCP, and what it wants to do in the future and what it is currently doing today. And we'll be right back with the one of the MCs from Shenyun, Jared Madsen, right here on the Rob Maness Show.
Hello, I'm Brandon House. I want to thank you for all your support at wvwfoundation.com that helps make possible pushing out 24/7 content for free. Without your support, we'd have to put it all behind a paywall. But thanks to you and your support through our foundation, we're able to push it out for free as a broadcast service and broadcast ministry of WVW Foundation. Please consider going there and setting up an automatic monthly contribution, or go there and make an occasional contribution. If you prefer to support us through the mail, you'll find our mailing address there at wvwfoundation.com. You can also call and make your contribution over the phone by calling 901-825-0652. That's 901-825-0652. Again, all these details are available at wvwfoundation.com. Thank you for your support as we try to help people around the world understand the times through the lens of a Christian worldview.
We're kind of used to it. I mean, imagine you're a performer in a dance company based in New York, and you're just used to getting bomb threats, and you're used to getting death threats. And the kind of email threats that we're getting back at headquarters saying they're going to throw us off of buildings, we're going to be killed in mysterious car accidents, and our houses are going to be burnt down, their family members are going to be murdered. And this is almost a daily occurrence.
Shen Yun is a classical Chinese dance troupe based in upstate New York, whose mission is to restore and showcase traditional Chinese culture. If you visited a major city recently, you've probably seen their billboards. Shen Yun Performing Arts says the threats, often in Chinese, are usually linked to the Chinese Communist Party.
Welcome back to the Rob Maida Show. It's Whistleblower Wednesday, and we're talking about how the Chinese Communist Party is threatening Shen Yun, which is this wonderful dance company that's based out of New York State that performs essentially the 5,000 years of traditional Chinese culture and history in a beautiful art performance. I'm not going to show too long of clips because I want people to go see this show and see these performers when they come to their area, or if they're in an area where they're performing, because it's fabulous when you take a look at it. My guest is one of the MCs for the show of Shen Yun, Jared Madsen. And Jared, as I was researching for the show today, I came across a comment from somebody. I can't remember if it was you or Li Xing, the other MC, and it said something to the effect of, if you've been to China today under communist rule, but then you see Shen Yun perform the 5,000-year history in its performance, you can see how the communism is destroying China. It's not obvious until you're able to see the comparison of the two. And that struck me as, well, no wonder the CCP is really after people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Can you talk us through a little bit more detail about the actual violent threats that you all are getting and how they come into you, what types of threats they are of violence, where they're happening at? It's not just in the United States.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's almost has become just kind of the norm for us to get these threats. They started from the very beginning. When they started at the beginning, it was more the Chinese embassy or the Chinese consulate would directly contact theaters. They would call them, send letters, send emails, and tell them, don't let Shen Yun perform. It will ruin China-U.S. relations. So that was more where it began, but that never really had much of an effect, especially in the U.S. Theaters were like, this is, what do I care about this, right? Like this is ridiculous. And even I remember a show that I was at in Ottawa. After the show, I went out to the lobby and I met a lot of the members of Parliament came to the show, and I thought that was interesting. I asked them, like, thanks for coming. Like, well, how'd you guys hear about this? That we heard about this through the Chinese embassy. They all sent us letters and told us not to go to the show. And so what did they do? Of course, they went to see the show. They wanted to see what it was all about. Why does the Communist Party not want us to see this? For me personally, though, early on, after a few years, I remember when our tires started to get slashed. That happened a few years in, maybe, I don't remember the exact dates, 2009, 2010, somewhere in there. And I remember one that I personally saw. I went out and the driver to the bus pointed this, said, "Does this look right to you?" And I said, "Absolutely not." It wasn't the kind of, like you see in the movies where somebody takes a knife and stabs it into the tire and it loses all its air. What they would do is they would slice the outside part of the tire, but not get that inner tube. So the tire wasn't, apparently what happens is the tire doesn't go flat. What you do is you start driving, and then when you go in high speeds, the whole tire explodes and then causes a serious accident. So from that point on, we needed 24/7 security for all of our buses and trucks. And I tell you, it's hard enough to get a performance company out there and sell tickets. And now we have all these obstacles, like having to get 24/7 security, that other performance companies, this is not something that they have to deal with. Then they started the bomb threats. And the bomb threats this year, as I just heard that we have, I believe it's 41 this year alone, 41 bomb threats at various theaters around the world. Now, none of them, there's never been an actual bomb, but it just causes this great disturbance. We've had people have to leave the theater, the police have to come in, the FBI is contacted, they have to look into this. There is no bomb. But we're getting these threats nonstop. And I said at the beginning, I believe this is like a litmus test. I believe what the Chinese Communist Party is doing is taking Shenyun and going, let's see how far we can go with this. How far in the United States can we exert our influence? Because I was reading last year, I believe it was June of last year, 2024, 2 documents were released. They were some secret documents supposedly from the Chinese Communist Party, and it was talking about this strategy called America against America. So where they try and get, whether it be media or government institutions, and use those to attack other entities in America, so that you don't see the CCP's fingerprints on it. And so last year we had never had bad press before. We've always had amazing press. And anyone who sees the show, they love it. They would give us rave reviews. But then they started to use American media outlets to attack us. And they would get institutions to do investigations into us. Now, of course, they haven't found anything, but I don't think that that's the point. I think the point is that they're trying to see how far they can take both the U.S. government, U.S. media, U.S. people, and use them against their own people. If this succeeds with Shenyun, then what group is next, right? I don't think they're going to stop at Shenyun.
Yeah, you're right. Well, let's take a question from the audience member, our host over there, Shell. Shell, go ahead. Who's got a question?
We have Joseph, sir.
Thank you very much, Colonel. Yeah, you said that you spent a lot of time in China early in your life. What do you think was the first time you finally recognized the totalitarian nature of the Chinese government? Because I know that a lot of us, when we spend a lot of time in China, cinephiles like us, we are enamored by a lot of things, and it takes a while for it to sink in. So I'm just curious at what point it really sunk into you that the government was not the people, and that the people are separate from the government. And second, why do you think Xi Jinping is now focused on your group specifically in order to target it?
Sure. So I had the fortune of my Chinese teacher in high school was actually Dan Rather's translator during the Tiananmen Square massacre. So he told me all about the Tiananmen Square massacre, and I actually ran into Dan Rather at the airport several years back. And then he was telling me about some of the stories. So I already kind of had a heads up before I went into China. I had this great fascination with Chinese culture. So I still had these rose-colored glasses when I first got there. I thought, all the great wisdom and everything like that. I would say it was probably about a year or two in. And I think that was especially because of my Chinese teacher in high school telling me all about the horrors of communism and what had happened during what he saw with his own eyes, people getting shot, things like that, during the Tiananmen Square massacre. And so after living there for a bit, you just see things that don't add up. It starts with, I take pictures of something that, I don't know, maybe it's like a building that's being torn down. And I remember people saying, hey, don't take pictures of that. And why can't I? I'm just taking a picture. It would start with small things like that. And then you just start to see, so for example, the persecution of Falun Gong didn't start until 1999. But I believe it was around 1998, you couldn't buy the books anymore. So that was already like, okay, why can't I buy this book that's being praised? So I believe that they were already, they had already seen those numbers and that they were already starting to put it together, their plan to bring down Falun Gong. For Shenyun in particular, we are the voice of traditional Chinese culture. We're also, from another point of view, we're the voice for Falun Gong practitioners, at least for one of our pieces, 1 to 2 pieces during the show. We're exposing the persecution of Falun Gong in China. And I think that's why the Chinese Communist Party just sees us as such a threat. Now, if they just don't persecute Falun Gong, they do not outlaw Falun Gong, and they just let us do the show, I would think that the Chinese government would praise us, but that's not how it is.
Yeah, I mean, to go back to your original question you asked in the first show, why wouldn't the Chinese government, communist or not, be praising groups like Shenyun for highlighting the positive aspects of China and Chinese culture and what it's done for humanity for 5,000 years? Because there's been some amazing discoveries, scientific, engineering, and achievements over that time period. I mean, it's not like even I don't like to be positive about a communist government, but even the China of today is a remarkable people that has become a high achieving society in spite of the tyranny and those kind of things. So it's very puzzling that they would do that, because you're getting positive attention out of their negative activities, and they're not getting what they think they're getting, are they?
Right. Well, you have to go back and look at things like the Cultural Revolution and some of those movements where there was book burning, destroying of Buddhist temples, Taoist temples. So this is destroying their own culture. You can't even call it their own culture, because communism is not inherently Chinese. That is a foreign concept, a foreign thing that came in. So it's this communist entity that's in China that's destroying that culture. Communism goes directly against Chinese culture. It's the exact opposite of Chinese culture.
Yeah, it's very puzzling, especially to those of us. I haven't been there. I haven't had an opportunity to visit it yet, but I have many colleagues and have studied this issue for decades now. That they really are confusing to a lot of people. Are you worried about conflicts, them being able to create conflict? And you can answer this after we go to the break, but I'll ask the question now, Jared. Are you worried about them creating conflict between Chinese background people, Chinese Americans, new immigrants, and being able to do that based on these hundreds of over 100,000 Chinese military-age males that have come through the southern border in the Biden administration by a lot of people's accounts? That's something that I'm concerned about. I want to get you to talk about what you've seen and heard from folks in the culture, both in the country and outside the United States, maybe in China too. We'll be right back with Jared Madsen, MC of Shenyun, that teaches through their beautiful art and dance and music 5,000 years of positive Chinese history and tradition. We'll be right back.
Shenyun was forged 5 or 6 years into the persecution. It's really an entity aimed at, let's show the world how wonderful China was without communism. Let's show the world the real tyranny of the CCP. They're putting that on the stage for people to see all around the world, millions each year. And that's a message that the CCP really doesn't want to see. And what we're seeing now is their ability to weaponize, whether it's mainstream media, regulatory agencies, to go after Shenyun and try and shut it down. And that's a real danger, because this is a playbook. As I mentioned at the opening of my remarks, this playbook can be deployed against any individual or organization that the Beijing doesn't like. And indeed, I think that's one of the big concerns, is we're looking at a national security threat, is the bottom line.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's Whistleblower Wednesday, and we're talking about Shenyun, a traditional Chinese dance company and art troupe that travels around the world and around the United States, as you just heard there, educating folks on the 5,000 plus years of Chinese culture, tradition, history before communism, and just highlighting that to people. And the CCP, the Communist Chinese Party, it's fighting against it, both violently and with regulatory agencies, unbelievable as that may seem to some. And my guest today is Jared Madsen, who's an expert on China and one of the MCs for Shenyun, and has been to the country quite a bit and has a lot of experience with the Chinese people and everything. And Jared, one of the questions I wanted to ask you, as somebody that's probably, I'm assuming, been in homes of regular folks inside China, this viewpoint that communism is there and in charge, but it's an external, as you pointed out, it's external to Chinese culture. Okay, it is not Chinese. They've tried to make it Chinese,